this spectacular panel that you're going to see is going to be, in my opinion, the best of the event. And I think the bar is already high, as you have seen from yesterday and already this morning. I don't know you, but I love the discussions yesterday morning between Chairman Pai and my former boss Ed, and I think we are going to have an even better event today. So look, as you have seen, the agenda of today for our panel is really talking about content and online video. And I don't know you, but for me, the last 6 months, I never consumed so much content in my life. So I think this panel is even more important for that. So, we are going to look at the challenges that have been brought to us by COVID, not only on the negative, but also on the positive side. And we are going to have a great discussions with 4 fantastic panelists. We are going to start with Dorothy Attwood, who is the Senior Vice President Global Public Policy for the Walt Disney Company. She joined that company 10 years ago. And, I remember that day very well, because before that, I was working for her and with her at AT&T, where she was one of our leaders. And her profile is even more interesting if you think that she has been working for several years in the FCC and leading some of the policy issues there. So, Dorothy, you really have the profile to start our great panel. And I'm going to ask you specifically on this. How this, let's say, COVID-19 years has been impacting your company, and specifically, what are the main challenges and opportunities that you guys have identified because of this year?
Sure. Thanks, Karim. I want to start by acknowledging that, we're really grateful as ever for the IIC to convene such a diverse group of global stakeholders. And, I think some of the issues that we're going to talk about today are some of the most exciting in the area of the future of communications and media industry. And I think it really is a testament to this forum that we can talk about it from the perspective of civil society, of industry, and of regulators. And in certain respects, as you identified, it's a bit of a challenge for the panel to describe a restart agenda for the content industry post-COVID, because our market trends are really, in some respects, quite positive. There are more options for users for new services than ever before. From Disney's perspective, while our overall business has certainly been extremely challenged by COVID. I mean, think about our sports channel, ESPN, without live sports, or theme parks and our stores with the distancing requirements and the shutdowns. But we also, in this time, launched our streaming service, Disney Plus, internationally. It's now widely available in Europe, recently in all of Latin America, and in key Asian markets like India and Indonesia. And I know, Karim, you wanted me to talk a little bit about Disney Plus. And in many ways, the story of Disney Plus is instructive for this moment in time, because, it's about really leaning into the legal, commercial, and technological disruptions as a way to weather the marketplace uncertainty rather than hiding or bunkering down. Our decision to move into the direct-to-consumer platform was a culmination of a decades-long strategy. It was to invest in brands. We've purchased a number of high-profile brands. To embrace technology, and that meant including advancing disruptive existing business models, and to do so to reach customers' expectations, to ensure that we're continuing to be relevant in the marketplace. So in the media space, this latest disruption, COVID-driven, but also really an outgrowth of the move to digital platforms, isn't really about a change in what people watch, but it's rather how they watch content and how and what they pay for. So there's clearly consumer demand for rich media content that's delivered to the home, and COVID has made that only cemented further. But just as we commercially are working through this disruption and trying to figure out what is the right business model, I think it's really the most challenging time for regulation, because as an ex-regulator, I always start from the place that policymakers have a legitimate interest in protecting the public. And in most cases, we all share the goals, everyone on this panel and in the audience. We want economic growth. We want fair and transparent rules. We want consumers to be protected from bad business practices. We want kids and families to have great entertainment options and to feel safe as they seek them out. And we want consumers to trust the marketplace. We want a wide range of content available in all kinds of languages and accessible to people with disabilities. The real challenge aren't those goals, it's how to meet them in the face of technological and commercial disruption and in the face of a pandemic. So how do you protect kids from inappropriate content when you can't rely on time of day restrictions and unified rating systems that were developed for traditional TV and movies? Now, how do you ensure local values are reflected when you can't control content through broadcast licensing? How do you make sure people can tell the difference between advertising and editorial content in a world of social influencers? And is mandating a certain amount of content on a streaming service be in a certain language the best way to make sure local content finds its market? All of these questions are really important. And though I would tell you they're probably the easier ones we're facing now because they reflect general agreement on shared goals. Now, in order to be successful in a competitive environment, a streaming service like ours has to gain consumer trust. We have to curate a catalog of high quality content that's attractive to consumers. That's because our goal isn't just to capture eyeballs on content that's long enough to display an advertisement. Instead, we have to and have invested in developing a sustained audience for our platform. For Disney, this is really especially true because we curate our content carefully for our family audience. And we have a safety by design approach. We give users options and information to control their viewing experience. Rather than the other option of trying to codify prescriptive rules in this environment isn't necessary and advisable because self-regulation and appropriate industry codes of conduct are much more flexible and can respond to changes in the marketplace and into technology advances. Whereas rigid carryovers, like from the linear model to streaming, can be a barrier. The truly complex questions, though, they're the ones that we're just beginning to understand, and I hope we get to some of them here because they are laid bare by COVID. And the issue is really that there's much less universality among governments and among people in how to solve them. Things like extremism, hate speech, political censorship, disinformation. These issues, there's a lot less alignment, and we're seeing around the world a willingness by governments to regulate these platform responsibility questions, and we, quite frankly, haven't figured out the right formula yet. I also think we have to face the fact that it's not just governments with a wide range of views on responsible behavior. There are media reports on the millions of times footage in the New Zealand shooting were shared among individuals really tells us something. So, in the end, people are irresponsible. They don't always see the larger consequences of individual actions, and bad guys have figured out how to exploit our digital ecosystem. These things aren't new. What's new, and I think what's really fascinating in the questions to sort of and deal with in this time is when the very structure that appears to be an enabler of the worst things, as well as the best things, exists COVID. How what can we do about it? So from my vantage point, there's a lot of interesting questions and a lot of time to talk about them on this panel, and I hope we get at it. And I hope we also work really carefully together in this kind of forum and others to build a robust restart. Thanks, Karim.
No, thanks, Dorothy. And I think you have been raising some important points that I'm going to take and continue in the discussion. And I think one of those is really the incredible capacity of everybody to react and to be together, under this crisis. And I think there is a huge lesson that we should learn on a post-crisis. I think that one day will be a crisis, and that's one of the real points. Yeah, one of the advantage, if we can call that an advantage of this crisis, is that we have started learning to do these events virtually. I am in Washington, D.C., you're in the beautiful California, and our next speaker is far away from us, but even if he's super close. So, Aynon is joining us obviously from South Africa, and you have all seen his profile, but you know, he's an incredible policy and regulatory expert. And as Dorothy, he has been working in as a regulator, and then I've joined MultiChoice South Africa as head of policy analysis and research. And you know, we were talking about those issues with Aynon in the preparatory discussions to this panel. And the most incredible thing is that wherever we are as a geographies, the challenges and most of the answers have been pretty similar. And I think this shows how our industry, and I will say our digital industry, our digital ecosystem, has been incredibly resilient and has been able to work from the telecom operators to the content owners and going through all the rest of the ecosystem with the regulators, have been able to work in order to really answer to those challenges in an incredible way. And just by the fact that we are able to host this event virtually in less than 6 months after is really an incredible result. But Aynon, what can you bring us from your particular, responsibility, but also geographies compared to what Dorothy has been focusing on and where your business model is going right now?
Thank you, Karim, and thanks, Dorothy. I think you covered a number of areas that are mutual to us as well. I think that, as you've mentioned, we in Africa, and I think probably one of the challenges has always been that we tend to lag behind the rest of the world. So when you look at regulatory matters, if something happens in the regulatory front in Europe, there's about a lag of 2 years. If there's a new technology that comes out, it can take up to 3 years before you see it happening in Africa. And I think one of the interesting things that's happened around COVID is that everything accelerated. So just as the rest of the world was dealing with COVID-19, so was Africa. South Africa, we went into the hard lockdown pretty much the same time as a number of other countries did. We faced the same types of challenges when it came through to our production houses having to shut down, inability to film shows, which placed, not immediately, but long-term has placed a bit of stress on broadcasters in South Africa. Because as you know, we had this period of time when everybody was in hard lockdown, everyone was at home, and they exhausted the video content that was available in libraries to a certain extent. I would say they exhausted it in the niches that appealed to them, and then started expanding to other areas. So if someone was into fantasy, they started looking at things that didn't particularly interest them before. But I think that was one of the challenges, is that once the hard lockdown shut down, was how to get your production facilities back into operation again as fast as possible, bearing in mind that every time someone reported that they had COVID-19, everything had closed down. Everyone that was involved on the set would have to go home, self-isolate for around about 14 days before you could start again. So there's been a challenge, but I think at the same time as there's been a challenge, there's been great opportunities. For a long time, we were used to doing business in a specific way, and COVID-19's challenged us to be more innovative, to look at workflows. How do you operate in a certain way in the past, and how do you operate during lockdown? And also, what impact is the lockdown going to have once people come back? Speaking for myself, I haven't been at work since March, so I've been operating virtually and will be operating virtually until February next year. So there's new ways of working that have come into being, I think, and the challenges expand beyond your business, because you were used to meeting people face to face, you're used to meeting regulators face to face, and you now have to depend quite a lot on virtual. And as you know, there's always challenges. Not everyone has the same type of connectivity, and so you're not always on an equal platform when it comes to communication. Especially since a lot of the regulatory staff are also working from home. Not everyone has the same type of connectivity that you do. So I think there's been a lot of challenges, but at the same time, there's also been these useful things on how you work, how you connect with people in a virtual platform, what type of programming that you're going to be doing, changes in formats going forward that will, I think, continue beyond this period. and also challenges, doing things in new ways. So Dorothy mentioned sport. With no live events, you had these sports channels, and they had to come up with very innovative and new ways of attracting viewers to their platform. So yes, they did have archive content. They used to use it in a particular way, but if you want to attract viewers, you've got to repurpose that content in a new way that makes it interesting and attracts people to view that programming. So I think those were some of the benefits that came out of COVID. It taught us new ways of looking at programming, new ways to present it to audience. We've shifted far faster into online, so a number of the broadcasters in South Africa who may not have been on the online platforms to the extent that my company is, suddenly found that they needed to provide new things. So the public broadcast in South Africa has launched new online offerings. So there's those changes that have come into effect. I think at the same time, when you look at that, the speed that things are happening is also faster. So how to use innovative technologies that we haven't been using in the past is the same for Europe. So Africa used to be able to use Europe and the United States as a globe, which we could look into, say, in 2 years or 3 years, we can expect the same things to happen, and now it's immediate. I think that's the key learning that we've got here, is this immediacy. It's the same immediacy that our viewers expect from us when it comes to providing content. There's been a change in the way that consumers consume content, I think, in this period as well. A lot of people who weren't quite satisfied with using technology and going online are now online, where previously they weren't. So I think that we will see next year, when we start to get the research coming in, we're going to see changes in the age groups of people who are using online technology and how they're using it. Previously, we were talking it's a younger generation. The older generation still prefer to be couch potatoes. I think that's changed in this 1 year dramatically and significantly, and we're going to have to look at how we deal with that in terms of providing our content. So I think there's a lot of challenges going forward. I know, Karim, that when we were doing our preparatory, you were talking about piracy, and I think that this is also an issue which we'd be engaging with regulators. So this year we engaged a lot on with the regulators on how we could assist during the COVID period. So there were groupings together between ourselves, government, the regulator, how to fast track approvals or authorizations for new channels that were addressing information around COVID-19, providing education for scholars who are stuck at home and weren't at school, what kind of programming, what type of education they would require to be made available for them so that they could still write the exams at the end of the year. And now we looking forward to interacting with the regulator around some issues which have raised. And piracy is one of the issues that I think, specifically around the online environment, that we're going to be looking at how ourselves and regulators in partnership can deal with it. Thank you, Karim.
No, and thanks for raising that, Aynon. And we are going to touch that point a lot in the discussion, because I think sometimes people look at the issue of piracy in a very small one, like being the issue coming only from 1 or 2 big corporations that are pushing for it, without understanding that it has an impact on the whole ecosystem. And being the husband of an artist, I can tell you that the whole protection of her own IP, even she's only a painter, but she's doing also her work on human rights and etc. The protection of IP is something essential, from the little producers or the one-off producers to the biggest corporation. And I think we now, during this pandemic, even more than before, because we have been consuming so much content, I think we understand the importance of quality content. And at the same time, I think, Aynon, your point over the evolutions of the platforms is pretty impressive, and I'm going to use that to move to our next speakers with María Dolores. I watch mostly news and etc. And I was seeing how my kids were consuming content in the last 6 months, and I have to be honest, they never turn on the television. They just use the OTT system, and they just used to go to recorded models of content, or even big user, and sorry for the advertising for everybody, but this is a reality, big user of ESPN, and especially for the Italian soccer games, and obviously in the US are distributed by ESPN. I can tell you, Dorothy, my kids will not leave happily in the last 6 months without the platform, okay? So kudos for that, also for the tranquility. But I'm going to go also for NBCUniversal because they have some great contents too. But okay, let's move from that. And I think our next speaker, who is María Dolores Souza, who obviously has been working for the National Television Council of Chile since '93, and has the particular approach of being, let's say, the free-to-air regulator, and the importance that that free-to-air has in our daily life, especially in a country like Chile. But I think in general, you know, I'm going to ask you, María Dolores, really to talk about the initiatives that the regulators and the industry, and especially the free-to-air and cable, had in the past month, because I think it's a pretty big success story when you look at what Chile has been able to do. Also considering that it was a tumultuous time, not only due not only because of COVID in your beautiful country, that I hope to be able to visit very soon, as soon as this whole crazy pandemic stop. But María Dolores, please, floor.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for having me. And well, we are the regulator of.
Dolores, we're having some challenges, I think, with your line. Let's see. Go again.
But we are the regulator of free-to-air and satellite and cable TV, not OTTs. And our institution is 50 years old. So we have some challenges ahead in terms of what's happening today with technological convergence, etc. But I wanted to talk to you about this initiative we had as regulators, together with the Ministry of Education and the whole industry, free-to-air, cable TV, and apps. And we managed to make a channel aired in the second multiplex of digital TV for children. It's an educational channel, and we managed to do that in 1 month. And there were lots of problems, you know, legal problems, because in some areas, because free-to-air TV, we have 7 big channels, 4 of them are very big, and then we have 100 small channels at the local levels, and also community channels. So we had lots of problems because digital TV we have no shutdown still. That will happen in 2024. So it's a little bit ahead, and nobody knows about digital TV. Nobody knows that you can switch to free-to-air digital TV. And this signal, or this content, was broadcast through the second signal of all channels, the multiplex. So people didn't know how to use it. So not only we had this channel, we had to do it together with the industry. Industry gave away their content, their educational and cultural content, free of charge. And cable as well. We had a very nice attitude from Disney as well, Dorothy, through one of the channels. So everybody was doing, it was around one goal, one only goal, to make this happen and to air this through this means. So we had to put this channel together without no cost for the government, because the state is really, there is a crisis. And we had to teach people how to use the second signal or digital TV. And they learned, and it was a success. So we had to do all these kinds of things. There were legal problems because we had only licenses which were not demonstration licenses, something like that. You know, they had just a period of time. They were not real licenses. It was a permit to air through the digital system. So there were some legal problems. There were other problems as well, because, you know, we have this, how you call it, this conflict among free-to-air channels and cable channels because of, how you call it, the carriage? Because local channels have to be aired or through the cable TV networks. So there were conflicts as well. So there were lots of things, and there is a crisis in free-to-air television. There is a debt which has fourfold in the first semester of 2020. Fourfold, and it is, you know, this is a small country, 18 million people, so it's a small market as well. But the debt of the free-to-air, the big four free-to-air TVs or broadcasters is $35 million, and so there are lots of problems. You know, they have had to cut costs, between 30 and 40% costs. Lots of people jobless in the industry. There is a problem with advertising as well. It has been cut off because it goes also online, but also because you know, enterprises are in crisis as well because there is an economic crisis. So within this all problematic, I would say, context, we could do this, and everybody could do this, you know, just for the children because there was a lockdown and they were at home. So they had to do something, and free-to-air television is what gets to everybody because there is 30% households who don't have, 35% who don't have cable or satellite. So it's only free-to-air, and those are the poorest families. So we had to do something, you know, that could get to everybody. And online and apps, it gets. So we have now, you know, an offer that gets to 90% of audiences, but we had to do it all the way, online, free-to-air, etc., cable, local channels, those very tiny channels in very isolated places as well. So it worked.
No, thanks for that, María Dolores. And I think your presentation or your comments shows us one thing: is the complexity of our sector, and is also the transformation that our sectors are going through. You know, being in the US now after moving from Europe 2 years ago, I can tell you just the television between the US and Europe are so different, and we are talking about two mature markets. And the comments that you make and that Aynon made shows us also that the same level of disruptions is coming in all the markets, and probably this crisis have really put a speed in the change of the sector. So this is one of the biggest challenges we have all in front of us, is the different approach to content consumptions between our different generation. I remember when I was a kid, I was watching one free-to-air channel in Ivory Coast, and there was one free-to-air channel. And when you look at the change and all the opportunities we have today, it's pretty impressive considering the little time frame, because I'm not so old, okay? So when I was a kid, it was not 80 years ago or something like this. But to continue the discussions on this, I really want to continue with Andrew Hall, from NBCUniversal, and I was asking him to give me a good idea of his whole CV, because his CV is pretty impressive. You know, I think he has been able to see the whole business in the past years by you know, working for Polygram, who then was owned by Philips at that time, who then was bought by Seagram, who then was sold to Universal Music, Vivendi, GE, until Comcast today. So Andrew, you have seen an impressive change in the last years. And we were talking about really the challenge for a company like NBCUniversal to specifically because of these changes of content consumption and of challenges due by COVID. And I've asked also to Andrew to focus a little on the whole question of windows and distribution that we have seen in the past month have changed a lot. And even now, with a recent announcement by John Stankey of AT&T a few days ago of almost disrupting the world distribution model. So, Andrew, what are your views? And you know that after you, we are going to move into the Q&A, and we are going also to discuss a little more the question of IP and piracy that has been raised by several of you guys.
Sure, thank you, Karim. Yeah, so that long list of owners, I'm never sure whether I should look at that as, wow, I work for a business that everybody wants to own, and that's why we've had so many buyers wanting to buy us, or whether it's like nobody likes us and nobody wants to own us and we're just constantly passed on to somebody else. I'll take the former rather than the latter, I think. But like you've all said, look, wow, what a crazy year we have had. Every industry severely impacted, but I think the audiovisual and media industry is probably more than most. We've all seen cinemas closing, or where they have been opened, audiences significantly down. We've talked about sports being cancelled. We had the Olympics, we lost the Olympics, so NBC carries the US broadcast rights. That's a big deal for us. Let's hope that the Olympics can happen next year. Production shut down, ad revenues down. So there's, look, no shortage of issues to deal with. But Karim, I think you said it earlier, the resilience of the industry has actually been incredible. And I feel quite proud to be part of this sort of resurrection of the audiovisual sector, that the response has been amazing. You know, you throw problems at the industry and companies, and you know, just to see the sheer number of people working so hard to get the business back up and running in ways that, you know, just your average consumer sitting on the couch is not going to see what goes on behind the scenes to keep programming up and running. Imagine news, for an example. You know, that's 24/7. That cannot stop. And we were involved from my perspective in ensuring, as we were tracking governments shutting down whole economies and societies around the world, we absolutely had to be sure that news journalists could continue to work, could continue to go into the studio, could travel to other countries where there may be quarantine arrangements. So that's all the back end, but we were impressed with the way in which governments were receptive to concerns about that, and also that governments really went out of their way to work together with industry when we were trying to get production back up and running in particular. You know, every government had its own set of regulations about the way in which things should be done, which was a massive amount of work for everybody. We had to put in place, you know, multiple safety checks, protocols, you know, 800-page documents on how we were going to ensure that our production staff was safe, testing processes, hundreds of thousands of COVID testing that have gone on our productions over the recent months, and then quarantining arrangements. So getting cast and crew in and out of countries was, you know, all a challenge. But again, I thought the governments that we have dealt with things, you know, A, in a way that they wanted us to get productions back up and running and would work with us on it, and B, worked incredibly quickly to ensure that happened. So that has all been incredibly positive, as has the fact that we've been able to continue to release movies. Not in the way that we would normally do so, but we've probably put out more films than most other studios over the course of the last year, and want to continue to do that into next year as well. But we have also introduced, you were mentioning new business models, we have introduced a new consumer offering called Premium Video on Demand over the past few months, which is sort of something that arrives at a time when audiences are fragmenting, and there's a desire and a need for media businesses like ours to stay relevant to consumers, to deliver content to consumers in the way that they want it, on the devices they want it, when they want it. And right now, the when they want it is really at home, to have fresh new content. And so this PVOD offering enables consumers to see films at home and meets the consumers where they are, and we've been very pleased with how that has gone and how popular that has been as we've launched it. And then, as you were alluding to, Karim, on the downside, as we've experienced lockdowns around the world, we've been monitoring what has happened on illegal consumption of content, and I guess no surprise, but alarming nevertheless, that we've seen piracy rates spike most dramatically, at the time of initial lockdown, with increases in the countries where we've been monitoring it of, on average, 30% increases for a period of time. Now, it has spiked and dropped off a bit after that, but those are big spikes in pirated content, and also visits to pirate sites have gone up by about 30% across the board. So it is a big problem. It's a global problem, and it is one where, having seen the way in which industry and governments can work together successfully to get businesses back up and running, if we applied the same amount of energy to tackling this problem, I think we could make some serious inroads. It's never going to go away, but it could certainly be reduced to a more manageable level than it is at the moment.
So look, using this and trying to sum up those points, I think we have been talking about some sectors being challenged, by the transformation of the industry, and specifically the free-to-air and etc. Looking at how and where they're going to go. At the same time, we've been talking about the challenges of productions during COVID. This is clear. There are lockdowns, and I have to be honest, some of the studios have been impressive in working on some different models in order to continue to produce, because sometimes we forget that in order to have all those new films, we need new productions, and those are big investments and big risks that are taken by the studios, but also by everybody. And now we are talking about the challenge, and your numbers were pretty impressive, Andrew, because you're talking about a 30% increase. So let me talk about this, and first I will ask to Dorothy, and then probably María, Dolores, and I will invite Aynon and Andrew too. But Dorothy, you have been with Disney and Disney Plus, one of the leads in putting a lot of the content on an OTT and available directly to all the consumers. Almost around the world now, but almost you're getting to cover all the geographies. Have you seen, because of this digitalization in a certain sense of the content, a spike of the pirate content of Disney, like Andrew has been talking about? Is it something that you're seeing? And in case it is, as I imagine, unfortunately it is, what can we put as a PPP, as a public-private partnership priority to work on that? Because I think COVID showed us that we can work super well together in difficult times. So I think the big lesson that we should all learn is how, when the COVID crisis finished, we continue to have this great work between the whole ecosystem, and I put our beloved regulators and the governments in the ecosystem. So Dorothy.
Thanks, Karim. I think it's a really interesting question, because early piracy. My CEO at the time, Bob Iger, used to say piracy was really one manifestation of customer frustration at not well-timed, not well-priced content. But what the direct-to-consumer and model has done, and what the choice has done, is it's really brought so much more content directly to consumers in a time that they, in a timely way, at prices that are quite affordable. And so the problem of piracy isn't one an end user trying to get the content they couldn't get for 6 months because it was in the movie theater. Now what you're really seeing is morphing into much more of a organized crime situation where there's so much money involved in getting content out to consumers, and there's so much confusion by consumers about whether a site is legitimate, because they're quite professional, these presentation of content. It looks and feels like it's just another direct-to-consumer model, or a video, a place where one can buy video on demand. A consumer can be really unwitting participant in the piracy that is taking place. And so the bad guys gotten much more sophisticated and much more. It's much more about chasing the dollars of what is can be quite lucrative, especially in the context of COVID, where people are looking for content everywhere. So there is a huge role, in my view, for the public partnership that you're talking about, public-private partnership you're talking about, because there needs to be a way in which we can ferret out the truly organized bad actors in some of the sites that are the most difficult. We found, and Andrew certainly can comment, being in the UK, we found that site blocking and identifying sites that pop up in different places around the world, but are reflecting the same organized activity, illegal activity. A cooperation among countries, cooperation among platforms and content providers and distributors, all of that matters to try to get rid of these folks, to put them down, to stay down. And that really takes the community effort that you're talking about. It really takes all of us looking and saying, what are the responsible practices? How do we get ourselves to find and get rid of bad guys, who, by the way, are also doing other bad things, like they're, this is cybersecurity issues related to undermining the trust of people in the commerce on the web. These are all related activities, and so I do think, I feel, on the one hand, we've handled the issue that's legitimate by consumers, which is, I want more stuff available to me when I want it, at the price I want it, how I want to consume it. We're not dealing with TV by appointment anymore, or movies that take too long to get to the consumer. There is content out there. What we have to do is we have to make sure that we've gotten rid of this really organized criminal element, which is manifest in following the money that is now really quite lucrative for piracy. So that's a long answer, but I think there's a lot of opportunity for groups to work together.
I think it's a great answer. And, I also want to pop in a question that came from our participant, who is linked to what Dorothy was saying, because the question was specifically related that are there some specific countries where those, let's say, pirates are hosting their operation in order to avoid a lot of what the UK, for example, has been leading. And María Dolores, if you allow me, I'm going to ask to Andrew to give us a little more details, because I think what Dorothy was referencing is a project that has been pretty impressive in the UK, and I think is becoming a kind of, a global standard, or at least we can hope it becomes a global standard, because you have shown some very good results. Andrew, do you want to tell us a little more?
Yeah, sure. So site blocking is kind of one element of and a very important element, is probably the biggest, most useful tool that we have as rights owners to tackle piracy. But it's essentially a legal tool that enables us to go to court to get an order. We identify a pirate site or a pirate operation, and we satisfy the court that it is manifestly pirating content, and we get an order from the court to ISPs locally in a country that they have to block access to that site. It is very effective. It's effective both for stopping people accessing those sites. it is effective in reducing overall piracy rates in a country, and it is effective in increasing traffic to legal options, legal offerings in a country. So all round, it is good and it works, and it is something that is available across pretty much all European countries, increasingly in Asia, in Latin America. I think we are doing it as an industry, and I want to say sort of 30, 40 countries around the world, and it is a very important tool. But it is essentially identifying ISPs as one part of the chain and saying, okay, there's a long chain of players who are involved in getting illegal content from wherever it starts to the end consumer. And ISPs are just one part of that chain, and this is that part of that chain. They deliver the data. Other players who are involved are search engines. Do search engines have a role in ensuring that people are not finding illegal content easily via search? Advertisers advertise on pirate sites. Payment processors are processing payments, either the advertising revenues or subscriptions to those sites. And all of those players should have a role. If we're going to be able to tackle this properly, all of those players should have roles and responsibilities to stop feeding the piracy chain. And in answer to your question that came in on the chat about, are there countries where we're seeing piracy particularly? I mean, you can view it in two ways. You can say, if I look at the piracy rates in Russia or in China, yes, they are very, very high. But that's local piracy rates in the local market. If I'm looking at another question of where are these pirates choosing to base themselves for their global operations, which they increasingly are, and to Dorothy's point, they make a ton of money. Those will vary. I mean, sometimes they're in Eastern Europe, but one of the challenges we have is actually finding them and locating them, which brings us back to a different issue, which is the other players in the chain, the companies that host these sites, the companies that provide other services to these sites often don't know who they're dealing with. They just take the money, take the registration of a customer, and when we go along to those legitimate services and saying, right, who's operating this site, who's your customer, they will give us information that leads to a complete dead end because there's no due diligence done on who that customer is. And that's a key ask of ours, is that there should be a know your customer, know your business customer obligation on some of these legitimate services as to who are they dealing with, and keeping books and records that lead us to the eventual guy who's running the operation.
That's very interesting. And to move to María Dolores, and I know that piracy is not specifically a responsibility of CNTV, but at the same time, María Dolores, you were talking about the challenges for, let's say, the free-to-air, but in a certain sense also for the cable in general, in reinventing their business model, right? So when I hear Dorothy and Andrew, I hear a lot of loss of revenues, because obviously every pirated content is money that is lost for the content producers, but is also money that is lost for the content distributors, because they have less opportunity. They can price their product in a different way, but also it's money lost for the governments, because I imagine Andrew and Dorothy or others are not going to pay taxes on that revenue that they lost, and that's a pretty big challenge, I think, for the whole ecosystem. So in the remits of your responsibility, María Dolores, and I don't want to put you in difficulty, obviously, but how do you see these questions compared to identifying new business models? Because I will say what I try to think all the time is, if something is illegal, in the real life, if there is a real life compared to the virtual life, it should be also illegal in the virtual life. If buying a fake bag of important brand is illegal, buying or getting it for free, but nothing is for free, like my father was saying. So there is every time something on the back. But buying a fake or a pirated Disney or Universal movie online should be also illegal. So, and all the money that we lose there doesn't give you the opportunity to promote those beautiful projects that you have been working on from TV Educa Chile or in general. So can I ask you to make the link between those two?
I think that nowadays, as regulators, we have to look at everything other regulators in the country are doing. So there is a law, which is not our law, but a recent law in 2018 from the Telecommunications Ministry. It's a new law, and it goes specifically to against piracy. So we know that that this is happening, and we have some numbers as well. We always, in our research, we always ask, for instance, do you have cable TV or satellites? And then we compare those numbers with the numbers of subscriptions, because we ask, do you have it at home? We don't say, do you pay it? We don't ask if they paid. So we are always having those, we exchange numbers, and we know that there is, I think, almost an 18% of households that have this kind of pirate devices, but not always, as Dorothy was saying, not always the end user know that it's a pirate, because they have logos and they have all kinds of beautiful things. But the Ministry of Telecommunications is working hard with the police and the public ministry to know what's happening, the ones that take the content from satellites, and also the ones that just tape the thing and then, give you a package and sell you a package. So there are different ways of doing this piracy, and we're aware of that.
I think you raised a good point. Is not all the time the user knows it is a content. This is a challenge. And this is, I think, where even more than before, government and industry need to work together in order to define that, because education campaigns are very important, and we cannot expect users to be aware that the little black boxes that they buy in some places, in some legitimate shops, and that they pay with their credit card and etc. If there is something like this, the consumer should expect that this is potentially legal. So I think there is a lot of work to be done there, and I know that everybody has been busy in it. But this is something probably that on a post-COVID we need to emphasize even more, because I imagine those shops are going to reopen, and that's going to be obliging to redistribute even more. But let me move to South Africa, to Aynon a little on this one also, because Aynon, you were raising that as one of the challenges that you're seeing in the market, and I'm going to ask you specifically what kind of piracy you see more. And as a full disclaimer, I'm not going to have the full discussions on piracy. We're going to move after that to more questions about productions and content quotas and obligation investment, because my dear friend Augusto Preta made a very strong question there, and I cannot avoid a question of an historical director of the IIC. But I also think that it goes very well into these discussions, because obviously we're talking about investment obligation at the same time. Then you guys, a content producer, are losing a lot of revenues because of the piracy. So one is linked to the others. There is something that can be done that should be done more on the other side. But Aynon, can I ask you your perspective from MultiChoice, please?
Yeah, I think for us, piracy is an African problem to a certain extent, that there is content that is being stolen. Sometimes the whole signal's being stolen. You'll find a cable operator in an African country is rebroadcasting whole channels. So signal piracy is a big issue for many years. It's an international issue. Some of those channels have showed up in China. Some of them have showed up in Australia. So it's not just happening, it's our content, it's African content. And I think it goes to that point that you mentioned, that it's not just the broadcaster or the OTT player that gets harmed when this content is distributed so widely. The producer does get harmed. In many cases, they may have sold the rights for you to broadcast in some very distinct markets. And when your signal is being distributed somewhere else, they are unable to sell their content in those markets because the viewers, they have already seen it. So to a certain extent, there's a devaluation of their intellectual property rights. There's an impact for government as well, specifically around when there are local content, because quite often there may be from government departments, there might have been funding made for co-productions, capital that had been extended to the producer for independent productions. And when these shows aren't able to be distributed outside of the country because they've been pirated, there's a loss to government as well, because they were hoping to stimulate a local content industry by providing funding or co-funding to producers for these shows. So it's not just the broadcaster who's impacted, it's also the producers, to a certain extent government. We had an interesting case here a few years ago where the public broadcaster and the commercial free-to-air broadcaster in South Africa also broadcast off the satellite platform, and they only have rights for specific content that, for example, Warner provides for South Africa. And their platform was hacked so that these, through Chinese boxes, which were being sold in other African countries, notably Botswana. And the end result of that was that although there was attempts to halt the sale of the boxes in Botswana, the easiest target for the commercial free-to-air in Botswana was to target the signal distributor in South Africa, because they felt they hadn't updated their security on the satellite platform as soon as they should have. And they actually won a court case in South Africa against the signal distributor, which was owned by government. So to a certain extent there, the main impact was actually on government. They had to pay court costs that were awarded to eBotswana for damages that arose because the signal distributor in South Africa, Centec, had not done a recent update around their conditional access. So the pirates themselves just gleefully change every time the security gets updated anyway. So you do need some response at government level, at international level, on how to deal with piracy like that. In this case, our regional SADC body should probably be looking at how do we deal with piracy that is crossing borders and is having an economic impact on our local broadcasters and our regional broadcasters because of that. The impact also results to advertisers. Because in that case, because the SABC, the South African broadcaster, was being received in a number of neighboring countries, a number of the advertisers said, well, people are seeing our content anyway, so we don't need to advertise in Botswana, we don't need to advertise in Namibia, which has a knock-on impact for the broadcasters in those areas. So there's some really real damage that occurs to governments, to broadcasters in other territories who own the rights in those areas. I was listening with interest to what Andrew was saying, because we've also been looking quite a bit now at the recent court order that UEFA obtained. And it's something we'd like to see happen in South Africa as well, because quite often what is being streamed is live sport, and often to the detriment of the rights holder in the country who's paid quite a bit for those rights. And it takes up to sometimes 24 hours to get a takedown notice into effect, and that's too late for something like a live event such as sport. And so you do have to look at things like preemptive court orders, which it's something we'd like to see happen in South Africa. And I'm sure a lot of other jurisdictions should be looking at it as well from a regulatory perspective. But that's only one tool. You've got to look at other tools. A good example is, where do these streaming sites derive their value? And quite often, it's not because they're charging the viewer. The viewer's viewing this content for free. They derive it from the advertising that's happening on those pirate websites around the content for which they've paid nothing. So you also got to look at how do you deal with that. And it does mean going broader than just government and the regulators. We've got to have a way to talk to the internet service providers in a common platform involving broadcasters, content rights owners, the regulators and government bodies, all a way to speak to each other and how can we deal with this. It doesn't always have to involve something that gets written down in law. We could come up with very innovative strategies, I think, between all three parties on how we can deal with piracy. You mentioned looking at content. I think one of the things that has come out of this lockdown period is there's been our research has shown us there's a lot of appetite for local content. So specifically for MultiChoice, and that's not just in South Africa, but across the continent, we're going to be investing much more in local content. We already invest quite a bit, but I think we're going to be upping our game in the local content. We've got a lot of productions already underway and more that will be starting up next year. I think that, with one of the things of the lockdown is people suddenly viewed broader than what they used to watch. And they suddenly discovered shows that they hadn't noted before, a lot of them local as well. And that stimulated interest and has stimulated demand. One of the things that happened in the lockdown in South Africa was that our regulator took a preemptive step to say, well, because a number of productions have been shut down, we don't think we're going to hold you to your local content quotas. And so we suspended those, and a number of other things were suspended during this period. But I think what was quite interesting is that even despite that there was a suspension, for us as a company, we still met our targets, and we went, I think, a little bit over them. And I think it highlights the fact that you don't always need regulations to make someone be incentivized in something. If we see our viewers like a particular type of content, we're going to invest in it. And I think for a number of countries, local has become something in which there's quite a big demand.
Thanks for that. And I think you raised some great points. And look, let's move on this. I think quota content investment obligation of quotas is one of the theme. Not only in Europe, as Augusto was telling us with the AVMS, but also in other countries. There was a huge discussions in Mexico that has been going on for a while, in Congress and Senate. There have been a discussion in Colombia on this, and I'm raising only two that I've been busy personally on in my previous job. So let's start a little on this. Dorothy, let's see it on the positive side, because I'm a positive person and I like the positive discussion. What are the main conditions for Dorothy to go to produce a film in a country? Because often the quota obligations are made with good objectives to have enough local content there. But sometimes they are, very, very exaggerated, and you have the opposite effect that instead of having more films available, you need to reduce the number of the film on the platform in order to have enough quota. So if you will try to look at positive agenda, what are the main conditions for the Walt Disney Company to go in a company to produce there? And you are one of the biggest producers in the world, so I think everybody will listen to this one.
Well, I think I want to kind of piggyback a bit on what Aynon said, because I think what drives your content production decisions, at least for a company like the Walt Disney Company, is really what does the consumer want? And, we operate in Chile, we operate in South Africa, and we operate in Europe. And all those markets, or I'd say UK, all those markets, the customers want and demand different kind of content. We have globally relevant content. So our stories, the big blockbuster movies, the Disney branded content is intended to resonate globally. It's intended to be broader messages of family, of the importance of friendships, the importance of parental and love. Those will resonate everywhere. But in the context of a streaming service, those are only one portion of what we produce. So in order to resonate in the markets that we are, in fact, entering or have entered, you need to have local content that actually appeals, because the sensibilities of consumers are really different. I always got a kick out of the distinction that our licensing folks, when they sold ABC, our network television content, to different countries, the kinds of things those countries demanded. And I'll give an example. In Latin America, we would have a program that was, I think it was 32 episodes of a Desperate Housewives season, for example. And our colleagues in Latin America said, "Oh, we can't sell that because the action moves too quickly." The Latin America audience, really, the telenovela, things don't happen that quickly. It's more of a soap opera. They can't keep up with the fact there's only 32 episodes. Our folks in the UK, who are used to a season of 8 episodes, things happen from one episode to the next, and they said, we can't deal with 32 of these things. People don't want 32 of them. And I use that as an example of just in terms of the sensibilities. It's not necessarily even the content, it is the way in which those consumers orient around content. So we're motivated, if we want to enter these markets, to find the sweet spots. I also say that, in fact, I completely respect and understand the regulatory incentive to want to say, I want you to invest locally. I mean, that's a valuable goal. The question is, what's the most effective way to get companies to do that? And that's where I think we find, with the competition, with the new business models, we are incented to, in fact, invest in communities. And there's I think there's a lot of confusion over content quotas in the regulatory objective. If the objective is an economic one, that is to drive production, then I think you can drive production by, in fact, offering actually incentives rather than requiring people to produce content. You can incent businesses like ours to come down. We have in Latin America, and we have some wonderful incentives in Brazil and in other places where that has produced a ton of local content, because not only are we going to want to for our consumer base, but we actually are incented by the government policy. You contrast that with the question of whether the government policy actually wants certain cultural stories told. In my view, that's when creating funds and incenting, again, companies to pick up those stories that may not actually have been available or may not be motivated or incentivized in the context of a global company like Disney, but for the fact that we're looking for local stories that government policy has supported because they want to be told. So it's I think the challenge is that in post-COVID, there's a lot of concern over how do you drive the economic activity, the productions that are occurring at the local level. And a quick answer to that is, well, we'll make people, we'll force an investment in order for someone to do business. And I think that's short-sighted, because really what you want to do is you want to incentivize people to come where they're already incented to, because of that local dynamic that you talked about in South Africa, where we're going to be looking for stories that is going to sell our product, that is going to differentiate us from other streaming services. And if over time, that drives a ton of money and a ton of economic activity that inures to the benefit of those countries.
I think you are spot on as usual, Dorothy. It's really impressive when you look at it, and I'm going to ask to Andrew to continue on this, because the UK has been considered all the time as the kind of role model, right, about attracting investment in production. And when you see what the UK has been able to achieve in the past 10 years, it's unbelievable, the number of productions and etc. That has been done there. And so, Andrew, if you would have to say the top 3 points that you will see, also considering the great points Dorothy just raised, and as a believer in free market, I believe all the time that market goes where demand is, and the one of the series is impressive. The analogy that that Dorothy used is a good point, and I think I'm more on the UK side because 32 is pretty long, so I'm more on the 8 episode. One thing that I would have never imagined possible is me looking at series in Norwegian subtitle, but then because of COVID, I started looking at new stuff that I would have never imagined before, and I got totally passionate. And I had some Norwegian friends that told me, "Watch that one, you will love it." And I tell you, I even speak some word of Norwegian now because after listening to like 2 seasons of those series, you're learning. So it was interesting to see how also local content from other places travels so well if it's well done. So the whole idea of local content is interesting, but I think in a globalized world like today, what is really local compared to global, and that will be an interesting future discussions. But Andrew, if you look at those 3 points I was thinking to promote local productions and etc., let me know, and I will ask María, Dolores, and Aynon to start thinking to the same, because I think even in your geographies, the debates are pretty advanced on this. And
yeah, you're absolutely right, Karim, on the UK. It's been a real success story that the UK government is rightly proud of. And how has it come about? Well, it's firstly, the tax incentive has been around for some time now. They were one of the earliest countries to introduce it. And secondly, they supported the build out and growth of facilities. So we have a number of studios, studio making facilities, so that the facilities are on the ground. The industry has done a great job of investing. We all as companies all invest in skills development. So you've got to have people with creative filmmaking skills coming through. And so you've got facilities, you've got skills, you've got a good tax incentive. And the other area I would add is you've got a government that probably out of all governments internationally gets the importance of IP and IP protection, and has probably done more to help protect copyright owning industries in the UK, which means that we all keep coming back. And if you combine that with the luxury that is now out there of increasing levels of production, all companies are producing more and more and more content because we have pipes to fill and consumers to feed, and production has never been as busy. So if I'm sitting there as a government internationally, I would be looking at, okay, well, wow, all of the facilities in the UK, I mean, I'm exaggerating, but a lot of the facilities in the UK are full. And there's a feeding frenzy for capability, production capability. Well, some of that could be going, left, right, and centre into other countries who are interested in incentivizing businesses to come to their country. So totally agree with Dorothy on that piece. I think the other point I would make about levies and obligations to invest and quotas and all of those issues is I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all, should be a one-size-fits-all answer from governments to this. I think there are types of offerings for consumers that don't naturally fit into a you should be investing in local content bucket. I will give you a couple from our world. We have a subscription video on demand service called Hey You, which is a low-cost offering of predominantly US, but it's reality TV programming. And it is very popular with a certain demographic. And we've rolled that out. I forget how many countries we are now in, but quite a lot of countries internationally. But it's a niche offering. If you like that kind of content, you will love this service. For a regulator to look at that service and say, hey, now you need to be have 25% or whatever the number is of local content on your service. It's like, well, that's not what people want from that service. They want a different type of programming that is US-based reality TV programming. Give another example of our sci-fi channel. Now, that is a channel at the moment, but if you said to that channel, right, sci-fi content, we want you in Vietnam to buy 25% of Vietnamese content. Not even possible. You couldn't even, there isn't 25% of sci-fi content in Vietnam. So I think there needs to be a recognition that perhaps there is perhaps there is an argument to be made about these 4 very large types of services, and when we don't think that quotas is a way to incentivize people to develop local content, and that delivering what consumers want is the way to do it, and together with local incentives to encourage people to create content locally. But I think it's one thing to look at big services like Netflix or Disney Plus, and that the rules that apply there don't necessarily make sense on thematic niche types of offerings, which are often the startups of today and the bigger businesses of tomorrow.
Karim, can I just jump in there too, because I just want to underscore, I also think it has a resonance for big companies in the sense that what we're all trying to do is find market niches. None of these direct-to-consumer platforms are identical. Netflix is a big library play, but Disney is branded content. So how does one create the Argentinian Star Wars, because Star Wars is itself a completely fantastical environment. And so when you think in terms of the way in which we approach consumers, it very much is a highly thematic branded collection of branded services. And so I think the question is a broader one. You're right that we have to not constrain the development of business models by imposing kind of thumb on the scale requirements by regulators to develop some certain content that regulators feel is necessary, whether it's local or certain stories or dramatic versus. Really, it has to be driven, as this market is, by the consumer desire and by our natural instincts as trying to get those eyeballs as a commercial matter. That drives, in fact, the innovation that you're talking about, whether it's a small company, a big company. The business model is evolving so rapidly that really that's exactly the point where you don't want regulatory intervention, because you really want the consumer to be driving that value proposition. So sorry to jump in, but I think it's important.
I think you're raising a very important point, and is, as usual, disruption of the market. And I'm going to move to María Dolores. But when I look at the content that my kids are watching, and they're not watching only the traditional content or the OTT content, they're watching a lot of self-produced content on some YouTube channels and etc. that are paying themselves with advertising that they get on those channels. So you also have disruptions coming from there. Are those channels going to change, or are the kids going to become more, normal content eaters, let's say like this? That will be interesting to see in the future. But I think that the right point is the industry is in pure transformation, and we have to be very careful of not disrupting everything by applying all regulatory models to an existing system. And I think this is a usual thing, we saw that in telecom, we saw that in every sector. That the most important challenge for regulators is trying to almost anticipate where the business is going, and trying to take a light touch regulatory in order to allow the business to work. But at the same time, we need to understand that we have to be careful of not creating monopolies and etc. So I think we have a big discussions in front of us, and the importance of PPPs there are even more relevant because of the place where we are right now, that the market is in total evolution, and we know that we have to be careful. As our great friend Dorothy and Bill Kennard was saying a long time ago, we have to be very careful of not regulating something that doesn't have to be regulated. And he was the chairman of the FCC at that time, and his policy have allowed the US to go into a huge revolution and an explosion of investments and services that allowed it to become a leader, or to re-become a leader. So this is something. So María Dolores, when you look at this, especially considering, as you say, you are in a market of 18 million people, or in a country of 18 million citizens, or a business of 18 million customers, depending on the different areas we're watching it. How do you see the world discussions there, and how a country like Chile can attract. And Aynon, I'm going to move to you after, okay? So we all closing on this one. And for everybody, we have 12 minutes. So if you have another question that you want to ask, please do on the Q&A chat. Oh, don't worry, I have plenty. And go.
The context in Chile is quite different. We don't have this kind of regulatory, framework like in Europe, because you are talking about fiction, most of you. But here, our regulation says you have to have in the free-to-air channels, you have to have at least 40% Chilean programs. And we have newscasts with an hour and a half each day, and the big morning programs, which are 4 or 5 hours a day. So we have the Chilean content already, without any fiction, just news and entertainment during the morning, which is news and all kinds of things. So we have no problems with that percentage of local content. What we do have is cultural and educational content. We have a new law since 2014, which says that you have to air each day at least 4 hours a day of cultural content. So cable and satellite, they do have that because it's one company that has the permit, the license. And if you have Discovery and other channels, you have a lot more of 4 hours a day. So you see, the way you look at it, it's like you are free because you already have this cultural content. And then for free-to-air channels, it's a little bit more of a problem because they have to look at things that are cultural. And but there is no limit as to what you understand as a cultural thing. So it can be, a program of an international program, or it can be a Chilean program, because it is something about universal values, human rights, identity. So identity could be local content, but you have other values and other things so you can choose a program. It does not have to be a Chilean program. And then, so that's the way. And we have a fund here at the CNTV, at the council. It's a small fund, but we stimulate producers, local producers, and well, we do that. But everything is market oriented. We have a public TV which has no funding from the government, so its revenues are from advertising like any other channel. So it's a commercial model. So we don't have lots of regulations in that sense.
Thank you, María Dolores. And maybe that's one of the reasons Chile has been so successful. I'm joking, but I think at the same time, Chile has been an example in a lot of the in the region, and I want to commend the work that CNTV, but also Subtel has done in general. It's pretty impressive. And having been regulated by you in the past years, in general, as when I was in AT&T, I have to be honest, it was a pretty open and transparent relations, and that was great. Okay, so Aynon, on your side, so when you look at this, sometimes we think to Hollywood, but we have a tendency to forget that in Africa we have a lot of local productions going on, and that the market is super, super vibrant. So what can you bring to our table?
Thanks, Karim. Yeah, we have a very vibrant production market. There's lots of independent production happening as well, in addition to the broadcasters. If we look at South Africa as a hub, we've got content production taking place. There's a lot of it in Nigeria, of course, Nollywood. But we're also seeing new hubs of production starting up, places like Zambia and in Kenya. So there's a lot of local content being produced in domestic markets, some of which is really only suited in those markets, and then other types of content that's been developed there also travels within Africa and possibly even further abroad. We're doing some co-productions at the moment that we think will travel globally at the end of the day, because the stories that they are telling are global stories and not just honed in, even though they may be told in local languages. So I think there's a lot of production that's happening. Just to touch on that bit about the regulators, which Dorothy and María, Dolores have touched upon, is that when regulators get involved, it should really be around market failure. If you identify that there's something in the market that's not happening. So I was with the regulator back in 2004 when we did the South African local content quotas, and then there was a specific failure in the market. Yes, there was not as much local content being developed. There was a concern at the time that the market might be flooded with mainly US and UK content to the detriment of the local production. And so you wanted to incentivize, or you wanted to create a market for the production sector in South Africa. And then those local content quotas also were trying to produce a certain type of content. So you also wanted to see not just talk shows, but you wanted to see documentaries, you wanted to see children's programming. And at the time when I was at the regulator, we were aware that children's programming next to news is probably some of the most costly programming you can do. And so you needed to kind of put pressure on the broadcasters to do that. But I think once again, that was done in 2004, and I think the broadcasters have far exceeded any of the quotas that are in place, which has shown that over time they've identified that this is content that there's a demand for, and so they moved to meet that. I think in Europe, I was recently sitting with the department when they were developing their draft white paper on audio visual content services. And they were looking at Europe, and particularly what Andrew mentioned, which is the recent 2018 amendment, which put in a 30% quota for on-demand program services, which is essentially the titles. 30% of the titles within a video catalog need to be of a European nature. And that in itself has had an impact on the European market. So by putting that in, it might have been to the detriment of some other European countries. So you might have seen that there were zones of production that were taking place. You mentioned the Scandinavian content that you were watching, Karim. It's very popular, and very clearly there's a lot of it. But some countries weren't benefiting from that, and I think that's why we're seeing almost the second tier of legislation that's coming. Spain most recently wanting to put a 5% tax so that they can facilitate, and that's over and beyond the European content requirements, a 5% tax on the on-demand players such as Netflix in Spain, and the aim there is to put it in a fund for independent production. So there's clearly, one of the things you always got to be aware of as the regulators, that when you intervene in a market, you may cause another effect which is unintended. And I think, when we're seeing these taxes in addition to the European content, it's addressing those member states who feel that perhaps the independent production sector has not been benefiting. But the minute you start to do that, you start to have all these other problems arising. And that's why you've got to be very careful when you intervene in a market, especially one as sensitive as the production sector. And I think, if we look at a number of countries now, in Africa, we're seeing a lot of production happening without needing any regulatory involvement at all, because there is a demand for it. And I think that's the key element, that the viewer themselves knows what they want to watch. It might not necessarily be the content that the regulator wants, but I would always caution against being paternalistic in terms of you thinking you know what people want and therefore you know best. I think regulators also need to be responsive to the market and what the market needs are. And I think regulation should not always be the first step you take. Interaction with the players in the market, looking at guidelines, looking at things such as development funds, creating incentives for co-productions with international players who can then bring forward to you skills transfer, new technologies that the people in your country aren't aware of. So there's a lot more you can do than just this quota.
So look, I think we are there. You know, I don't want Amanda to be totally upset with me because I don't finish on time. You know, that's my role. I really wanted to thank our panelists, and I thought you all enjoyed these spectacular discussions where we learned a lot. I think we learned about the importance of IP protections, but we also learned the importance of the right incentive in order to attract those local productions that are going to boom, okay, in general, because of the total different business model we're moving to, from a traditional to a lot of distribution through the OTTs. I think it's a pretty impressive revolution going on. And if I can take as a final wish list, especially considering the role and the role that the IIC has, is really to work together between the industry